All right, so the last video for this section, this is chapter 2. It's the first week of our phonetics class here. This is about vowels, the articulation of vowels. And again, we're basically just covering English vowels for now, but we're going to be using the IPA approach to describing and organizing the vowel sounds that we come across. And so there are three main dimensions for describing vowels. Two of them involve the position of the tongue, and one the position of the lips. So the tongue can be further forward or further back. So we're going to call this the frontness dimension. Some people call it the backness dimension. It's sort of just the reverse of exactly the same idea. Vowels can be front, central, or back. And we see in the IPA chart, it's not exactly columns, but there's kind of three columns-ish of vowels. And then the tongue can be further up or further down in the mouth. And so the textbook mainly goes with high and low to describe this. The IPA chart actually goes with close and open. So you think for a vowel like E versus Ah, the mouth is more closed for E and more open for Ah. The jaw is more open or closed. So I think it's important to know both of those schemes. When we get to acoustics, there's actually one point where calling them high vowels gets a bit confusing because high vowels have a low frequency of one of the formants, and low vowels have a high frequency of that formant. So that may be helpful for you depending on how your brain works, or it may be easier to say close vowels have low frequency. We'll get to that later. Don't worry about that. But it's good to know that there's these two different sort of parallel sets of terms: high, low, close, open. Here's where the textbook isn't quite following the IPA scheme when it starts describing the vowels of English, because the IPA scheme has close, close mid, and open as the labeled rows in the IPA chart, in the vowel chart. The textbook just goes high, mid, and low, or close, mid, and open, if you will. And the problem there is that English has pairs of what the textbook is calling mid-vowels, like the A, E sound, or the O sound. And if you only have high, mid, and low, you need something else to distinguish those mid-vowels. And the textbook introduces the tense-lax distinction. So the A and O are tense, and the E, O are lax. Now that tense-lax distinction is kind of useful in describing the phonology of English vowels, but it isn't the IPA standard. The IPA standard is that we have close mid or high mid A and O, that's the tense ones, and open mid or kind of low mid E and O, that's the lax ones. Okay, so I don't mind you learning both, but for this course, we're going to stick pretty closely to the IPA chart for these vowels. And then the third dimension is lip rounding. So we have the rounded U, O kind of vowels and the unrounded E, A kind of vowels. Another thing I want to mention here, the textbook is pretty clear that obviously different varieties of English have different pronunciations. That's what the term accent means to a phonetician, is different pronunciation, right? So and in English, that largely falls on the vowels. Different accents have different vowel structures. The textbook uses General American as a sort of reference variety of English, and that's fine. This is a course being taught in Canada by a native speaker of standard Canadian dialect, so a variety of English. So that's what we're going to be basing it on. So it's a little bit different from the textbook's variety. So when I give it an example pronunciation, I'm going to be basing it on my pronunciation, which is Canadian English. So, for example, it has that O merger. So the words caught, as in something you sleep on, and caught, as in past tense of catch, are synonyms in my variety of English, but not in General American English. And it's important to me to be nitpicky here. This isn't me disagreeing about pronunciation with the textbook. I agree that General American is pronounced that way, And they, I think, would agree, as they describe in this chapter, that Canadian English is pronounced this way. Uh, but a transcription, which we're going to get to in the next chapter, a transcription is a description of a pronunciation. So every transcription in the textbook is going to be a description of a particular pronunciation. Even if you're not given the pronunciation, they're using a pronunciation as the basis of that description. And similarly for the pronunciations that I present. So I'm just going to be describing pronunciations of Canadian English, and wherever possible, I'll be giving you the actual sound, the actual recording that I'm describing there, because I want it to be very clear in your minds that a transcription is never a transcription of a written word. It's always a description of a pronunciation. Even if you're not given the pronunciation, a phonetic transcription is meaningless except as a description of an actual pronunciation. Okay, off the soapbox, couple of things left in this section here, and then we can move on to the next one. The textbook talks about the syllabic R or R-colored vowel, and there's some subtleties here that we may get to, we may not. There are different ways that people transcribe, for example, the vowel sound or the syllable nucleus in words like her and bird and world. That sound that's forming the core of the syllable. So it's kind of, some people would say, acting as a vowel. It's a syllable nucleus. It's not quite exactly the same as the sound, the R sound in, for example, 3 or 4, right? Those R sounds are a little bit different in things like duration, loudness, and even the acoustic, some of the fine acoustic properties that we're going to get to later in this semester. But it's pretty close. So my default, unless I'm getting really nitpicky and doing things like acoustic measurements, my default is to just transcribe this as the same as the English R sound, an alveolar approximant. Other people like to use a rhoticized vowel symbol, and you can find that in the diacritics section on the IPA chart. And I just wanted to sort of highlight that. That's something that I do a little bit differently. I'm a little bit less picky than other people about exactly how that's transcribed. It's important to remember that's not a vowel plus an R sound, though. Like when I say bird, I'm not saying a B and then a vowel and then an R and then a D. I'm saying a B and then this thing and then a D. And whatever this thing is, it's kind of like an R, a little bit different, and depending on the context, some people like to transcribe the difference. I tend to like to transcribe it as, it's mostly like an R. Anyway, the textbook also points out things like diphthongs, so the difference between a diphthong vowel and a monophthong vowel. Monophthong vowel has one sound in it, so it can be transcribed with a single symbol. A diphthong has two sounds, sort of a movement from one position to another position. The vowel symbols that we have describe one articulatory position, so a diphthong needs two symbols. And there's kind of two conventions for transcribing diphthongs. One is with a sequence of two vowel symbols, and that's fine. Another is a sequence of a vowel symbol and an approximant. And that's the one that I tend to use, but I have been trained in both, and I'm completely happy with both, whatever's more comfortable for you. And as we get to transcriptions, I will present both as options for you so you can see them. And when we get later on in the course, you'll see why those two are considered acceptable by such a picky phonetician, why they're kind of interchangeable in this context. Okay, so that's vowels, right? We have the three dimensions for describing vowels, some issues around paying attention to differences between varieties of English, especially in the vowels, that R business, and the idea of diphthongs and monophthongs. Okay, so that's it for this section.